wasn't only one company coming in to buy the slaves, so all the companies needed to identify their captives. So down here they had branding metals with initials and logos of the companies on the metals. They set fire at the forecourt, put the metals in the fire for it to become very hot, from there into hot oil and straight to the bodies of the slaves. So they brand them for easy identification, so that when the various slave ships are in, the companies will be able to identify their captives before to remove them into their ships. And after branding, there is separation. Males are held in here in the male slave dungeon. Female slave dungeon is down there about 8 meters from here. So in short, this was what was transpiring in the Cape Coast slave dungeon. And so today we shall also bear witness to whatever injustice that transpired in the Cape Coast slave dungeon. There is many to be seen and many to be heard. And here we turn into one of the biggest crime scenes committed against humanity. So when we check the history across the world, there is no form of injustice like the transatlantic slave trade. Europeans being the perpetrators of this injustice, Africans are being the victims of this injustice. So today we shall also go in and we have an experience in it. Before we go, we check the flags to this side, another one to this side. So this is the first one. Michelle Obama traces ancestry to this very castle. So 11 July 2009, the Obamas were here and came to visit, and this flag was to mark their visit. Another one slide that's presented by the National House of Chiefs in Ghana during the first ever African Historical Theatre presented in here because they believe some of the chiefs were also part of the transatlantic slave trade. So this was brought in to serve as an apology to the ancestors, and secondly to pass on a message to humanity. Humanity should see to it that nothing of such ever repeats itself in the history of human lives. So National House of Chiefs 1992, first ever Pan-African Historical Theatre Festival. Before we go into the dance, I'll pause for a while. If you have any question, contribution or suggestion, I think it before we continue with the talk. Please, any question? If no question, we step into the dungeons. We have no experience. You watch your step while we go.
Are we going to come back?
Yeah, sure. So this was the state of the dungeons. They had no light in here. You can see the 3 holes up here. That was serving as their only source of light and ventilation. Kept them here a minimum of 2 weeks and a maximum of 3 months. So the dungeons, they were just like a waiting area for the ships. So far as the ships are not in this way, they live their lives. So the ships are in to move them away. So minimum of 2 weeks and a maximum of 3 months. Held in the darkness for so long, historically, most of them became either partially or fully blind. Because being in the darkness for so long, when they took them outside, the sun rays affected most of them. And so that's why most of them became either partially or fully blind upon being taken outside. So that was the state in the dungeons. The light you are seeing around is what the facility managers have faced in here. They had no light during that period. We are currently in the male slave dungeon, and there are 5 chambers in here. Each of the chambers held about 150 to 200 male captives. And so in all 5 chambers, about 750 to 1,000 held in the chambers at the time. In here, it will be more, it will be less, because when the companies are away, they will keep before they will come back. And while they are away, they still keep on buying captives in here. So sometimes by the time they return, the dungeons is very packed. But sometimes it can be less because when they move in to move their captives away, you have to refill the dungeons again. Those that will be left in here are those that their company ships are not yet in to move them away. And so a minimum of 150 and a maximum of 200 in each of the chambers. It could be more, it could be less than that. They were doing everything here. They urinate, they go to toilets, they slept in here, sometimes they fed them here. And so at a point in time, domestic slaves were not able to come around to clean the waste in here. And even when they come to clean, they can't clean everything off. So they put sand on the rest and they brush it off. And so constantly over time, the waste mixed up with sand and heaped up in the dungeons to a level like this. 1974, archaeologists came from the University of Ghana to excavate this very chamber. And after excavation, we saw the bricks in here. The bricks happened to be the original floors of the dungeon. But before he excavated, he was not seeing the bricks. And so out of curiosity, he needed to carry the samples for testing. After testing scientifically, it proved that everything he collected from here happened to be the urine, toilet, food particles, sweat, vomit of the ancestors that mixed up with sand and solidified all over the chambers. And so it was only after the excavation he saw the trenches, some to the wall, some to the middle, some to the side. The middle one happens to be the main one, connects from here to the large chamber connected into the sea. So the purpose of the trenches was to flush out some of the waste into the sea. But we asked ourselves how many times will it rain for the rainwater to come in to flush out all this waste. And even when it rains, the rain will only come in when the wind blows to this direction. Aside that, no rain entered the dungeon. Even when the rain came in, the little amount of rain does not come with any pressure to flush out all this waste into the sea. So the purpose of the trenches as they planned was not met. So at the time, that's why the waste compiled in here and heaped up in all the chambers. So this happens to be the original floors, the bricks we are seeing, and the trenches were to flush out some of the waste. And so only after the excavation he saw the bricks and the trenches we are seeing here. After excavation, he left a portion to show the progress of evidence for clarity's sake. And so looking to this side, you can't see the bricks in here, but to this side you can see the bricks. And so this is to show that the whole chamber was covered by the waste, and he excavated to see the bricks. And so if this side is also to be excavated, we shall see the bricks lying beneath the waste, which happens to be the original floors of the dungeon. But currently, this is the urine, toilet, food particles, vomit, sweat of the ancestors that mixed up with sand and covered the whole chamber. And so they left it here because some of the tourists, they do come in, they doubt. If they doubt, the samples are here for them to take samples for themselves for testing. Second to the last chamber was left unexcavated. So while we are going through everything we'll be working on is the waste of the ancestors that has compressed all over the chambers. And so urine, toilet, food particles, sweat that has mixed up with sand and compressed all over the other chambers. This very chamber was known as a strong room. So most of the ancestors were freedom fighters and held in the dungeons. When the Europeans entered the dungeons, they normally tried to fight them. All those who try to fight them, when they identify them from the other chambers, they bring them here and lock them up in chains and shackles. The chains are locked to the walls to prevent easy movement of the captives, and after the door is shut in here. So among the 5 chambers, it was only this chamber that had a door. And so after they bring them here, put them in chains and shackles, chains locked to the walls, and after they shut the door in here. This was because this very chamber was for the freedom fighters. So by so doing, they're just trying to suppress them in here. If they still try to fight them, they move them from here into the condensed cell to eliminate them finally. So to the walls, you can see the 3 holes on the walls. These are remains of where they lock up the chains. So chains are locked up to the walls to prevent easy movement of the captives, and after they shut the door in here. And so all 5 chambers, it was only this chamber that had the door, because this particular chamber was created for the freedom fighters. So first chamber in the male slave dungeon. Please, any question? If not, please ask. Yes, so we excavated. So after there were some patches and other stuff in here. So that's why you're asking. So I think this is cool. Yes. So after they patched some places, so the archaeologists came to excavate. So I'm sure this side is very deep. That's why they patched this side. But the original floors are the bricks you are seeing. So when we reach the other side too, I'll show you traces of some of the bricks, which shows that the whole floors are made up of bricks, but currently we are on the waste of the ancestors. Any question again? We see the 3rd chamber.
I can see some wood there.
This is spiral. When the dungeons becomes very aggressive, not all the time you can step in here. So they spy through this side just to keep an eye on them, just to monitor them, to know whatever is going on here. So while we go through the other chambers, we shall see other spy holes in the other chambers. So this is just a spy hole. So from the top, you can have a clear view to the dungeons. You go this way. You watch your step, you are watching. So everything we are working on is the waste. So urine, toilet, food particles, sweat, mixed up with sound, compressed all over the chambers. And so if we are to excavate to this point, we shall see the bricks lie all over, just like the first chamber. But currently we are on the waste of the ancestors. Upon all the atrocities that was going on in here, we had a church right up here, the name of the church, Society for the Propagation of the Gospel. It is currently the Anglican Church. Anglican Church in Ghana started right from here before it moved to other destinations in the country. It's not a coincidence nor a mistake to find a church up here. It was just their intention to be building the churches on top of dungeons. So when you go to the other castles, we shall see similar thing in there. So Catholic Church started from the forecourt in Elmina Castle. The Dutch also came to establish their Reformed Church on top of the female slave dungeon in Elmina Castle. And up here, Anglican right here, the Methodist Church started from the forecourt where the graves are. And Presbyterian Church also started from Christianborg or Sucastle in Accra. So all these churches, they are the main churches or the Orthodox churches in Ghana, and they all trace their roots from the various castles in here. And this is to attest that the churches were also part of the transatlantic slave trade during that period. And so the churches I made mention of, they all gained about 50% of the profit from the transatlantic slave trade. So churches during that period, they were just like a tool to psychologically enslave the Africans to surrender to whatever they were bringing in. It's a form of mental slavery and a form of indoctrination they brought in for Africans to surrender to whatever they were bringing in. The church is right up here. They created a spy hole just in front of the church. So you heard someone speak up there. The person can also hear me clearly from here. So they created a spy hole to monitor the captives in here. So that while going in and out of the church, they will hear them and they will analyze to know whatever is going on in here. If there is noise, they can analyze to know that probably they are weak or they are hungry. That's why there is noise. If there is no noise, they can analyze to know that probably they are asleep or whatever little food they brought in, they are okay. That's why there is no noise. So the spy hole is right in front of the church, so that while they went in and out of the church, they can hear them, they can analyze to know whatever is going on in the dungeon. And so basically this was an ideology they were trying to teach us. And so up there happened to be heaven, and here happens to be hell. So the heaven and the hell ideology clearly portrayed in here. So you can have the close the church door to the side, come to the side one by one. The blue door up there, you can watch it to the side so that the rest can also see. So the blue door up there is right in front of the spy hole. That's the first door to the church. So while they went in and out of the church, they just passed by the spy hole so that they can hear, analyze, whatever went on the dungeon. So that's the door up there. And the spy hole is just in front of the church door. So you can have a look and after you check the fourth and the fifth chamber. Water to come in to flush out some of the mist. So you can see the rainwater is in. So it wouldn't come with any pressure to flush out the waste. So that's why over time it makes up the sun and covered the whole chamber. So though at a point rain will come in, but not all the time. So there are instances that we come in, it will rain heavily, and there is no amount of rain in here. But today there's rain, which means when it rains, the direction of the rain was to the side. That's why today there's a little bit of rain in here. You can see traces of the trenches in here. The traces of the trench and additional bricks. So this is not part of the trenches. This is part of the floors. And so this is to show that the whole floors were made up of bricks. But currently everything we are working on is the waste of the ancestors that has mixed up with sand and covered the whole chamber. Please, I hope it's clear. Some might argue this one is closer to this one, so probably it's part. And when you check to the side, you can see additional bricks here. very far away from the trenches. So this is to show that the whole floors were made up of bricks. You can see bricks all over. So the whole floors of the dungeons were made up of bricks. But currently everything we are on is what the ancestors unconsciously built on. So urine, toilet, food particle sweat that has mixed up with sand and compressed all over the chambers. When the light went off, we saw this chamber remained very brighter for a reason. So we step in and I'll make the presentation. Abu. So this is the last chamber in the male slave dungeon. Here very brighter. When the light went off, the other chambers remained very dark. And here was very bright. This was because here was the sorting room or the selection room. So when the ships are in, they needed natural light to throw in here so that they can do the sorting. Weaker ones from the stronger ones, they put the weak ones to the side for nurses, doctors to check up on them. When they recover, they will have to wait for the next ship. If they don't recover, they die, bodies are thrown off into the ocean. No befitting burial for the ancestors in here. Strong ones in chains and shackles, they journey through an underground tunnel. So from here to the other side, there was a space, just like how we also came. And so initially, the blockage was not here. So they journey through the underground tunnel, about 80 meters they will exit. When they exit, females will join them, they go through the door of no return. Tunnel blocked in 1834. This was because 1807 a law was passed in Britain for the abolition of the slave trade, looking at how inhuman the trade was. But the trade continued here until 1834. Captain George McLean was commanded to supervise the blockage of the underground tunnel to mark the end of the slave trade. So tunnel blocked in 1834, supervised by Captain George McLean to mark the end of the slave trade. And this is African spirituality. Before the introduction of Christianity and Islam, Africans had their own way of communicating to the Supreme Being. So the indigents around, they were praying through a rock. And so the belief of the spirituality was that the Supreme Being existed and he created all natural things. And so if they are to pray and their prayers are channeled through the natural things, such as the rocks, the trees, and the rivers, these natural things, they serve as intermediaries and communicate their prayers to the Supreme Being. So indigents around Cape Coast, they were praying through a rock. So the whole Castle area happens to be a large rock. That was the deity or the god of the people. And so coming in, they came to build a castle on the rock. So the castle has no foundation. It sits on a large rock, and that was the deity or the god of the people. Now building the castle on the rock, they were not allowing the indigents to come around the area to worship again. So that's why they carved samples of the stones and took it into the town to establish a shrine there so that they can continue worshiping in there. When the Europeans left and officially the castle was given to Ghanaians, around the 1970s, the traditional authority decided to bring the rock back to its original position because the whole castle area happens to be the original place the deity used to live initially before they moved it into the town. And so if they have left, they have to bring it back to its original position. So the shrine was not here during the slave trade period, nor the colonial period, but they decided to bring it in here and establish a shrine here for the deity. So this is an active shrine. We have a chief priest in charge of the place who takes charge of the day-to-day responsibilities in here. Liquors for the pouring of libation by the chief priest for people to see how the African spirituality is being practiced. Money just as token of offering from tourists who come in, people who come to pray and others who come in for consultation. They leave something for the priest just as token. And to this side, we can see wreaths of flowers to this side. The purpose of the wreath or the flowers to pay homage to the souls of the ancestors. When they die, they were not buried in here, but we believe their souls or their spirits are still here. And so that's why the flowers are brought all over to pay homage to the souls of the ancestors. So this happens to be the last chamber in the male slave dungeon, the sorting or the selection room. Please, any question? If no question, we continue to the break. So the whole courtyard was a cemetery for the Europeans. So when they died, they buried them here. When the Africans died, the bodies were thrown off into the ocean. So no befitting burial for the ancestors in here. So the Atlantic Ocean that lies here, we term it to be a mass cemetery or mass grave for ancestors or for the African sea, because we can't even determine the number of Africans that were buried in the Atlantic Ocean that lies in here. That's why it's said to be a mass cemetery or mass grave for the ancestors or for the African sea. So 1996, there was an excavation at the forecourt. They identified several graves here, but most of them had no names or inscriptions on them. So they covered all of them, remaining the 4 we are seeing to this side. So similar ones like this were here, but they were all not identified. So this one is an unidentified grave. We don't know the owner. So similar ones like this were here, and they were all covered. So walking around, there are people buried beneath us. But because their graves had no inscriptions on them, that's why they covered them and left the 4 that had inscriptions on them. This is the only black man they buried here. Originally, his name was Kweku Eji, and Kweku's father was a slave merchant. He brings in Africans to be sold in as slaves. Because of the relationship his father had with the Europeans, they offered Kweku a scholarship to study abroad. So taken from here, age 11, to England, he went to Oxford University, he went to study theology. Age 24, he graduated as a theologist. Following year, brought back as the first Anglican African missionary. And so up here happens to be the church. He was also preaching up there, all the ancestors were down there suffering. At a point, he wanted to preach against the trade. But the same trade you have benefited to study abroad, the same trade your father was also benefiting from. And so who are you to speak against the same trade you are benefiting from? And so upon making an attempt to preach against the trade, treatment changed for him in the castle. The salary as a priest not coming anymore. So Kweku started going into the town to commerce in order to get something for himself. Out in the town, he was already educated, so he started teaching the indigents how to read and write. And so in Ghana, the Western form of education is attributed to this man, because we believe he came to spread Western education in then Gold Coast, Ghana. So the name originally was Kweku Eji, but British couldn't pronounce the Kweku very well, so they corrupted the Kweku to Kwaku or Kweku. And upon baptizing and Christianizing him, they added Philip to the name. The name became Philip Kwaku. Age 75, 1816, the only black man buried among the Europeans. And so some of the basic schools around this place have been named after him to be honored, because we believe he came to spread Western education in then Gold Coast, Ghana. So we have Philip Kwaku Boys School, Philip Kwaku Girls School around this area. So this is the only black man. And even in the graves, we saw they isolated the black man from the European graves. So still during that period, racism was still manifesting. So racism started not today, it started years ago. And all 3 are for the Europeans. We can move closer when we talk about it. So all 3 are for the Europeans. So the first one that lies up there, a soldier, a lawyer by profession, by name C.B. Whitehead, died age 38, 1812. Up to now, no confirmation of what actually killed him. But after he died, there were 2 rumors that came up. Some supposed malaria to be the cause of the death of Letitia. Some also of C.B. Whitehead. Some also supposed a war between the English and the Dutch. He got shot. But up to now, no confirmation of what actually killed C.B. Whitehead. But he died 1812, age 38. Lady one, Letitia Elizabeth Landon, the wife of Captain George McLean. So for her, she came from England to visit Captain George McLean. She came barely 2 months. She was found dead in McLean's bedroom. And after she died, there were 3 rumors or 3 schools of thought that came up. First one supposed malaria to be the cause of the death of Letitia. Second one supposed when Letitia came in, she came to see Captain George McLean, the husband, was cheating on her with an African mistress by name Ellen Panama. And so out of jealousy, she poisoned herself. The last one supposed the African mistress disguised herself to be a servant to poison Letitia so that she would get George McLean for herself alone. And so after she died, they found a bottle of liquor beside her. When they tested it, proved that it contained poison. That's why speculations about her death, maneuvers about poison to be the cause of the death. But up to now, no confirmation as to whether she was poisoned, she poisoned herself, or malaria killed her. She died at the age of 36, 1838. And there's a husband, Captain George McLean, very popular in Ghanaian history, with a popular bond of 1844, which led to the colonialism of Ghana for 113 years was drafted by him right up here in the court. So courting system in Ghana began from here. He drafted a popular bond of 1844 here after took it to the Palaver Hall for Commander Hill and the 8 fancy chiefs to come together to sign the bond. And that paved way for the colonialism of Ghana for 113 years. In the dungeons, I showed you a blockage of the underground tunnel in the 5th chamber. He supervised for the tunnel to be blocked to mark the end of the slave trade in 1834. He was an administrator in here and the president of the slave merchants. He died at the age of 46, 1847. Confirmed malaria killed Captain George McLean. So these are all European graves, and the isolated one is the only black man buried among the Europeans. Please, any question? Let's see the condemned cell. So this was a cell, condemned cell. They purposely designed it for the freedom fighters. So first chamber, I made mention, most of them when the Europeans enter the dungeons, they normally try to fight them. All those who try to fight them, when they identify them, they bring them here for them to be killed. So here, no food, no air, no water. Through suffocation, starvation, the captives will die before the bodies are brought out. Bodies are laid at the forecourt to serve as deterrent or lessons to the rest, so that next time they wouldn't try to fight them. After the bodies are loaded in sacks, they put them on smaller boats, paddled to a distance. They load everything off into the ocean. No befitting burial for the captives or for the ancestors in here. Over 200 years old, this is the only original door left in here. The door made up of pitch pine wood coated with metal. Aside this door, any other door or window you see here has been changed or restored. The only original door left in here, about 200 years old. So this side, names of descendants of the captives. So year of return, year of return 2019. That was when they came here. So some of the descendants of the captives, they came to visit the castle, and when they came, they left their names here to show that indeed they came to visit the ancestors. So names of descendants of the captives pasted to the side. So from the team, you can see African Genesis Institute. We are the children of those who refused to die. So descendants of some of the captives, they came to visit. If no question, we shall have an experience in a cell. You lower your head or you can have the feel of the door before we enter.
Down the back.
Please watch your head. Okay, we can move in a little so that everyone can join. Then we step out in normal. No air, no water. Originally it was a storage room. So from the back you can see a blockage there. At a point they couldn't stand them, so they needed to devise something to be killing them. That's why they converted it from a storage room into a cell. So when they bring them here, no food, no air, no water, through suffocation, starvation, they die before the bodies are taken out. 3 heavy doors locked up on that. First door is what we saw out there. There was a second one to the middle, a final door here. So here, no amount of air penetrates here, no life needed. They struggle, they die before the bodies are taken out. You watch your head, you watch your head. You watch your head. You watch your head. So from the cell to the last one, they were all storage rooms. To store some of their goods they were bringing for exchange. So the cell at a point was converted by them from a storage room into a cell. So initially it was a storage room. So at a point they couldn't stand it, they converted it into a cell.
The tops are residents.
Yeah, tops are residents for European officials here and offices for them.
Very good. Journey of no return.
This is the tunnel, the portion of the tunnel.
Journey of no return is
So
down
it
there.
starts from the shrine, the 5th chamber. So I made mention initially the blockage was not there. There was a space. So they channeled them underground. They walk underground through to the outlet, through to the side. They continue the exit to the last point. Females will join them. they go through the door of no return. So this is just a portion. Here, nobody goes in, nobody comes out. A soldier is just stationed here to keep an eye on them, command them to move faster. And so while they move, another one will be down there to make a head count of the number of captives. So this is just a portion, 13 feet deep. You can just lower your head, you have a look, and you continue down one at a time. Exit. So the exit of the tunnel was here. So it starts from the faith chamber in the shrine. They continue through to where we saw right now. They will exit from here. Females will join them, their dungeon is just out here. They join them, they go through the door of no return. Initially, the door of no return was located to this side. The door was very short and narrow, designed for one person at a time. So the captives in chains and shackles, they bend down, they are forced through the door into the smaller boats to transfer them into the bigger ships, and from there, they move to their various destinations. But at a point, because the sea lies just at the back of the castle, the seawater was coming in to distract their activities. So they blocked this side and created the door of no return to the other direction. So here happens to be the initial door of no return, and this happens to be the final blockage of the tunnel to mark the end of the slave trade. So blocked to the exit, blocked to the entrance in the faith chamber in the male slave dungeon in 1834 to mark the end of the slave trade. Please, any question? Let's see the punishment cell they designed for the females who resisted rape. So when the Europeans are coming in, they don't bring their wives. They go into the dungeons to select some of the females to be raped. They don't want to satisfy themselves. And most of them, they also resisted, they were also freedom fighters. So females who resisted rape from them, they bring them here to serve punishment of about 7 days. Held in here, they fed them once in a day. The food was just to sustain them, not even to satisfy them. A metal gate in here would be shut. There's a small hole down here, that was where they were easing themselves. And there's another hole to this side, serving as their only source of light and ventilation. So females only after serving their punishment before they moved them back into the female slave dungeon. But a lot of them, they got pregnant through rape. All those who got pregnant, they took them out of the castle. The Europeans had burnt bricks houses in town. Nurses, doctors will be there to examine them, take care of them till they give birth. When they give birth, after a period of breastfeeding, they take the kids from the females, and the females are brought back into the castle. Stronger ones after pregnancy, held in the dungeons to serve as commercial slaves, they will be shipped away. Weaker ones will be held in the castle to serve as domestic slaves to help to do the chores in the castle. So stronger ones, commercial slaves, weaker ones, domestic slaves, helping to do the chores in the castle. And the kids were accepted by their European fathers. So the church at a point in time was converted into a school for the mulattoes or the mixed race children. So the mulattoes or the mixed race children are the children the Europeans had with the African ladies. So they are neither white nor black. That's why they call them the mixed race children of the mulattoes. So they were accepted by their European fathers. So most of them grew up to become slave masters, clerks, administrators, interpreters in this very castle, taking up to whatever their fathers were also doing in here. So this appears to be a punishment purposely designed for females who resisted rape from the European officials. And so for the kids, they lost total contact with their mothers because most of them, their mothers were shipped away. And even though their mothers are held in here, their mothers didn't get the opportunity to see them or to even identify them because a whole lot of mulattoes in the castle here. Please, any question? Let's see the female slave now. The female slave dungeon, they have two chambers. This is the first chamber, the other chamber to our opposite. And each of the chambers held about 150 to 200 female captives. In our two chambers, about 300 to 400 held in the chambers at the time. Their only source of light and ventilation, 1, 2, 3, together with a big one here. This one will serve as a spy hole for the Europeans in case they want to keep an eye on them or select some of them to be raped all through the spy hole. So it wasn't open like this, they had metal bars or partitions within. They wanted the females for a reason, for reproduction, so that when they get to the new world, they force most of them to mate with the men. When they give birth to the children, automatically they grow up to become slaves on the plantations. So So their motive for being wanting females, mainly for reproduction and to also support in the work on the plantation. And more of the men were needed for the active work on the plantations. And so that's why they took a lot of the men and less of the females, mainly to reproduce and also to support the men on the plantations to work. Everything we are working on here too happens to be the excrement. So they were also doing everything here. Urinate, go to toilet, slept in here, sometimes they fed them here. The sad thing here is that even after menstruation, there was no bath for the captives. The only time they get an opportunity to take their bath is when they are being selected to be raped by some of the officials. For that one, they take them up there. There is a water system up there. Take water from there, freshen them up, take them out for them to be raped. Aside that, no bath for the captives here. They are held in their mess till the ships come for them away. The flowers are brought in to pay homage to the souls of the female ancestors. Though when they die, they were not buried here, we believe their souls or their spirit still remains here. So this happens to be the female slave dungeon, and there are 2 chambers in here. Please, any question?
So what would be the ratio of male to female slaves?
So they took about 1,000 of them in, and about 300 to 400. Yes. So
Roughly 1 to
yes,
3?
yes, 1 to 3. Yes. So 1 is to 3. Exactly. Any other question? Okay. So if no question, then we see the door of no return. When we return to the door of return, we can do the door of So this happens to be the door of no return. The door was not large like this. It was very short and narrow, and they designed it for one person at a time. So the captives in chains and shackles, they bend down, they are forced through this door. At colonial period, Gold Coast was a capital, and in here was an administrative seat. And so because of the administrative and trading purpose of the Europeans, they changed the smaller door into the large door to suit their own intended purpose. So originally it was very short and narrow. When you visit Elmina Castle, for them they have the original door of no return there. But here changed by the British to suit their own intended purpose. So originally very short and narrow. We call it the door of no return because Africans returning through this door, they lost everything with respect to their lives. They lost their roots, their identity, their culture, their religion, their fundamental human rights. They had no opportunity to even say goodbye to their family members. When they moved them through this door, normally they place them on smaller boats to transfer them into the bigger ships. Because of the weight of the bigger ships, they can't dock closer to the shore. So they dock far away smaller boats to transfer them into the bigger ships. And through that process, a lot of them, they drowned themselves in the ocean to die. This was because most of them had not seen the ocean before because of where they were being captured from. Others believed in reincarnation or the life after death. And so because of their belief upon being placed on smaller boats to be transferred out of fear and because of their belief in reincarnation, most of them, they drowned themselves in the ocean to die. Rather than being taken into the new world, they wanted to die. And so there is an instance that 5 people being in chains and one wanted to go. When the one goes, automatically all 5 died together. So instances that most of them were drowning themselves in the ocean to die because of their belief, and some were also afraid because they had not seen the ocean before. When they reach the new world, those who survived the journey into the new world, they would baptize them and Christianize them. They give them Christian names and they bear the surnames of the slave masters for easy identification. And so for example, if a slave master is Smith, when they bring the captives, they will baptize them, give them Christian names. So they will all be bearing the surnames of the slave masters with Christian names. So for example, Thomas Smith, John Smith, Elizabeth Smith, Cecilia Smith, all bearing the surnames of the slave masters purposely for easy identification. And with respect to language, as time goes on, they are forced to learn the language of the slave masters to bridge the language gap between the captives and the slave masters. And so Africans journeying through this door lost everything with respect to their lives and they never returned home. And so that's why we call it the door of no return, per the description up here. And so they estimate over 48 million Africans taken through only this castle. And out of the 48 million, only 12.5 million are said to have survived the journey into the New World. And 3 times that same number couldn't survive the journey. And so about 36 to 37 million couldn't survive the journey. And so some died on board, some died upon reaching the New World. All those who died in here that were thrown into the ocean, those who died on their way upon being captured coming in here, all not accounted amongst the 36 million that died. And so if you are to add all these people, then probably over 60 million Africans only through this custom. If you are to add the other customs, then a whole lot. So that's why there is a saying that Europe underdeveloped Africa. So throughout all this period they spent in here, they took away all our able-bodied men together with our resources to develop Europe. But now they are saying Africans are lazy a whole lot of times, Africans are riches and a whole lot. So to some extent, they contributed to the development in Africa, but now they are saying a whole lot of things about Africans. So you choose your stance for yourself. If you have a look through to the door of no return, where are fight? So the sea was coming up to this point about 4 to 5 years ago. The rocks we are seeing here, this is a sea defense created about 4 to 5 years ago to block the sea from coming into the town to distract activities. And so originally the sea was coming up to this point. And so when the captives reach in here, smaller boats like what we are seeing are here to transfer them into the bigger ships. And from here they move to their various destinations. Some taken to the Americas, the original 13 colonies in America. Some taken to Europe. Some taken to the Caribbean countries. And ships will move back to Africa again for the captives. The movement on the map just like a triangle. That's why they call it the triangular trade, with the Atlantic Ocean as the middle passage. And so from here the Africans lost their roots and they never returned home. But today we have Door of Return right behind us. Narrative 10 in the year 1998. First ever Emancipation Day was celebrated in here. Those who came from the African American diaspora, they brought 2 skeletons of the descendants of the captives. Samuel Carson from New York and Miss Crystal from Jamaica. Coming reaching Anumabo, about 30-minute drive from here, they placed the remains on smaller boats and they paddled them to this place. They believed that when the ancestors were being carried away, the sea was a passage into the New World. And so if they are returning home, they should use the sea as a passage back home. That's why they placed them on smaller boats, paddled them to this place. Upon reaching here, moving them to the Door of No Return, we believe the chains of the Door of No Return got broken. And so the narrative had to change to Door of Return to welcome the ancestors back home. And so because of the return of Samuel Carson from New York and Miss Crystal from Jamaica through the Door of No Return, the narrative had to change to Door of Return to welcome the ancestors back home. At the forecourt, they had a befitting funeral ceremony for them, dubbed the Great Homecoming. And after the remains were taken to Asanmansu, where they normally took their last bath for them to be buried in there. And so because of the return of the skeletons of the descendants through the Door of No Return, the narrative had to change to Door of Return to welcome the ancestors back home. Please, any question? If no question, we shall also return to the Door of Return. We take a short conclusion up there to end the talk. Here throughout the tour we got to realize Africans were involved and Europeans also involved. So we say judgment is not pertinent or important. If you are to judge, you have no one to give the blame to. Africans involved, Europeans involved. If we are to judge, whom are we to give the blame to? So we say history despite its wrenching pain, however, cannot be unleashed. But if faced with courage, then need not for it to be lived again. Maya Angelou. So in summary, whatever has happened is in the past, and we can't move back to correct whatever has happened already. So what we try to say is that we are learning from the past to correct the present and the future. So that if today we also encounter any form of injustice, we know that injustice is reigning in a modernized form, in a different form, in our country, in our society. But whatever form of injustice we come around, we can also try to fight against them when we learn from the past. So history, despite its wrenching pain, I made mention, cannot be unlived. So whatever form of injustice we come by, we urge ourselves to come together, fight against all injustice to make the world a better place for ourselves. If we don't fight against any form of injustice we come by, there is the near possibility of it coming in the long run to also affect us in the near future to come and the near generation ahead. And so that's why Martin Luther King Jr. once said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of neutrality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So if today we see any form of injustice, any form of modernized slavery, we shouldn't say it is not affecting us or our family members, so we wouldn't speak against it. But we should come together, fight against all injustice to make the world a better place for us all. And so if a living being, you would never want to be enslaved, and whatever form of injustice we come by, we come together to stand against it to make the world a better place for us all. The message we carry away today is never again should such an act ever happen in the history of humanity, for we are one people all together but different colors. And so wherever we find ourselves, our strongest voice of nationalism and patriotism should be heard all over, contributing to nation development, trying to make the world a better place for us all. Thank you very much once again. Good evening. And my name is Kutu. They built a wooden lodge just for trading purpose. Going for it, Swedish came in to fight them from here. They took over the land and they built a fort here. So the fort they built happens to be the condemned soil, that stream to where the other people are. So that was the fort they built here. But when other European nations take over, they will also add up. So there were additions until they got this. So Danes came to fight the Swedish from here. They took over the edifice. They also stayed here for some time. The Dutch also came to fight the Danes from here, and finally British came to fight the Dutch from here. So British, upon taking over the edifice, they elevated it up to the castle level we are seeing today. So finally, when the British came in, they didn't want any other European nation to take over the castle and the trade from them. So they were very smart to analyze the history in there, knowing that there were a series of overthrows in there. And so if they are not to protect the whole edifice, other nations can also take over the edifice from them. So they built two forts, Fort Williams and Fort Victoria. You can't see it from here, but they are on top of the mountains in the town. And so when enemies are coming, soldiers are stationed in the fort. They would see far than soldiers in here. So when they see them approaching ships, which are not their ships and probably their enemies, they will signal them, the soldiers in the castle. In the morning, they use red flags. Afternoon, reflections from mirrors. Evening, they use torchlight to signal the soldiers here. So there are communication rooms in the castle to receive the signals. So there's a small hole in the communication room. When the soldier stands there and looks through the hole, it narrows the view up to the fort. And during that period, here was not developed like currently. So the fort stands out on top of the mountain. So whatever signal will come straight through the hole. So if it is the red flags, the mirrors, or the torchlight, they will get it directly. When they get it that enemies are approaching, that's when they get on board to operate the cannons to shoot the approaching ships. So the ones to this side are called the cannon guns, and the balls are called the cannon balls. Before they shoot the pound gunpowder in the cannon gun, they add the cannon ball to it. There is a small hole to the tip. They light a match or a fire to the tip. They shoot the approaching ships. And each of them travels about 400 to 500 meters. And they had two types. One, they have holes within them. One, there are no holes. So the ones here, some of them, they have holes within them. They put in gunpowder, they put it in the cannon. When they shoot, it blasts the approaching ships. The ones without holes, they were just meant to break holes in the ships so that the ships can sink. And so all these were brought in by the British to protect themselves from other European nations from taking over the castle and the trade from them. And interestingly, they lived in here for so long. British settled in here from 1664 up to 1957. So in total, they lived in here for 296 years. They used 183 years for slave trading, and they used 113 years for the colonial period. And so 1664 up to 1834, 1844, before the colonial period began, is 183 years. And 1844 to 1957 is 113 years. So in total, 296 years. Only the British until 1957, Ghana gained independence. Please, any other question?